Hey guys, welcome to the Dragon's Voice podcast. I am your host, Trilly Reese Deans, and I hope you guys are enjoying this so far as much as I am. And I hope you guys are enjoying the moments where my team, Barry Town, are heading into the Europa League. And I'm recording this on the Wednesday. On the Thursday tomorrow is going to be their qualifying against NSI Ruvenik. At the moment, Connors Key are playing against Sarajevo, which is, I hope I said it right, because they used to be owned by Vincent Tan. We've got TNS Abala playing in I think it's either tomorrow or sometime over the weekend. I'm not too sure because with this COVID stuff, you don't know what's going to happen or go around the corner. But we're recording at this moment. Well, these four Welsh clubs are playing in the Champions League and the Europa League, so all the best to them. Even though they probably won't see us until next week. But anyway, my special guest today on the show. I'm very glad that I've not got a football guest now because I always wanted football fans to come on because it shouldn't be about footballers. It's always be about people who've written books. Funnily enough, this guest right here, he's written a few books in his times and he's also a Cardiff City supporter. Don't worry, Swansea, Wrexham, Newport fans. I really want to get you guys on the show. I'm not being biased. But my guest today is none other than Mr. James Leighton. How's it going, sir?
Very well, very well. Thanks for having me on, Reese. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, pal. Well, let's get down to it. So a lot of people are going to be wondering, how do I get a lot of my guests on the show, right? And it's like people who know people. But I remember because I remember messaging you, nothing to do with the podcast. It was to do with a play that I've written. And funny enough,
that's right.
And it was all about Fred Keenor. Yeah, and that's how I messaged you, and then it got down to the podcast then, and I'm actually glad now that you're coming on because we can talk about, footballs from a fan's perspective. Me as a Barry Town fan, you as a Cardiff City fan. I used to be a Cardiff City fan, and we'll get down to that in a moment. But for you, what was it? Football, what made you get into it anyway?
God, I didn't really have much of a choice, to be honest. My dad is just like, I'm from a family of football fanatics. His father was a football fanatic. Used to take my dad to Ninian Park when he's grown up in the 50s and 60s. My dad is like an absolute maniac when it comes to football. His trivia of the last century of football is frightening. He can just pick up anything. So as a kid, it was kind of rammed down my throat. And I was taken to watch my first Cardiff City match. I think it was 1987. Welsh derby against Newport, and Cardiff won 4-0. And I thought, oh God, I'm onto a good thing here. I thought Cardiff were a really good team. I didn't see them win for quite a while after that. I soon learned that was not the norm, being a Cardiff City fan. But with my dad, and then my godfather, my cousin, and my brother, and my dad, we all go to games together. My godfather is just a crazy football fan, even worse than my dad. So just the group of us, we followed not just Cardiff City over the years, but Wales, go watch football teams on the continent, throughout England, Premier League games. We've seen all sorts over the years, from watching Cardiff near the foot of League Two to going to watch Barcelona, Real Madrid. So we've done we've really mixed it up over the years.
Yeah, it was funny enough. It's like with me, when I grew up, my dad is not a Cardiff City supporter. He's a big Everton fan. But it's like with me, I wasn't a big football fan. I was always into I still am into my wrestling in some ways, but that was always it. But I mean, like you said, you were just thrown into it as a young kid, just thrown into it. So it was always Everton. But then I started supporting Cardiff City when I was coming into about 9 or 10 properly this time. And
I think growing up in South Wales, certainly when I was younger, and Cardiff were really, the late 80s, early 90s, and Cardiff were down at the bottom, League Two, and football coverage was what it is today. Then, like, there was very little coverage on TV. You were lucky if you got your first division match once a week on TV back then. So, as a Cardiff fan, back then you would almost adopt a Premier League team to watch as well as go watch your local club. You'd always have a soft spot for a Premier League team as well, because that was the only way to watch it on TV. So yeah, like you supporting Everton, I was always had a soft spot for Spurs growing up. And thankfully, as you get older and there was more TV coverage, Cardiff became more and more. They were always my number one team, but Spurs totally faded into the distance in the end.
With that in mind, you must have seen some of the most glorious. I always say glorious years of Cardiff City because you're watching them through the late 80s, early 90s, and I mean I was only born in 1996, so 96. This is around about the time where Bobby Gould was becoming manager. I would get down to Bobby Gould because I've asked a lot of players. I mean, I've had a few players who played for Wales, former footballers who played for Wales under Bobby Gould, and I'll get that. And I've always asked them about their perspectives. But luckily, I've only asked those who are not in the friction, if you want to say that. They had a few caps here and there, and they've always been, I'm more than happy to play for my country, so I ain't going to get involved. Unlike Ryan Giggs, Dean Saunders, Ian Rush, Neville Southall, these kind of, or even John Hartson as well, who got involved with Bobby Gould. All that friction. But funny enough, let's get on to the Wales then before I'll get into other Cardiff City stuff. So, as a fan, now, bearing in mind, like I said, I was only born in 96, so I ain't going to have a frigging clue what was going on then. But for you, as a following Wales at that period, what was the frustration like? What was your perspective on Bobby Gould being manager of Wales?
Oh, it was a funny time, the mid-90s, because we'd done so well under Terry Yorath and had come so close to qualifying for the World Cup in '94, but for a Paul Bowden missed penalty. And then it felt like we had even though we didn't qualify, there was momentum building, and there was young players like Giggs and Gary Speed who were coming through and really making their mark. There were still world-class players like Neville Southall, Rush, Saunders, Mark Hughes. So there's a nucleus of what was a really exciting team. And Terry Yorath, he didn't have his contract renewed, and it kind of all fell apart for a bit from there. So it was a lot of frustration. And I can't remember when Bobby Gould was appointed a little bit. I think Mike Smith came in after Terry Yorath, didn't he? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, it was. Let me get this right, because funny enough, I was going to write a novel, and I did my research on this, but I just threw it away in the end because it all got messy. But I remember when Terry Yorath left, Toshak, funny enough, we've spoken about him before.
Yeah, he came for a game, that's right.
He came for a game, and that was 3-1 against, he lost 3-1 to Norway, and then he just buggered off. And then Mike Smith came back, and I was told by some of the older fans who actually watched Mike Smith's first stint as Wales manager, a lot of people had a lot of faith in him because they thought, well, he almost got us there into that European Championship. It was only that Yugoslavian and Rudy Glockner in the 70s. Boy, that's going back a while. That cost Wales that moment. But a lot of people had faith with him because they thought, well, he could bring the magic back. But that didn't happen. And that's when Bobby Gould started to come into the mixture then.
Yeah, I think for me, because you're right, I forgot Toshak came in for a game, and there was a lot of excitement about that because obviously he'd done so well at Real Madrid, and he was Cardiff boy, Welsh. His first game, it was at Ninian Park, and even though it didn't go to plan, it was thought, right, okay, we're not going to go far wrong with Toshak in charge. Obviously, that fell apart quickly. And then, Mike Smith, his previous stint at manager was well before my time. So when he came in, it was a bit underwhelming for someone my age at the time. I didn't really know much about him. And sadly for him, it didn't really work out. So when Bobby Gould came in, I kind of remember at the time that Bobby Gould was a big name. He'd done very well at Wimbledon and in the Premier League, and anything linked to the Premier League at the time for Cardiff and Wales was a real bonus. So I was quite excited when he came in. I remember I was in town one day and walking down Westgate Street, and I saw him walking towards me, and it was as if like you'd seen Michael Jackson or someone. I was like so starstruck. I was like, oh my God, it's Bobby Gould. So I always had a soft spot for him, and you hear all the crazy stories when he used to get through the crazy gang. He was always great value in press conferences. So I would always defend Bobby Gould until it just got to the point where it was just so clear that his style of management, his tactics, if they weren't dated, they just were not suited perhaps to international football, which was, it was a real shame. It was, we took some real hammerings during that time, and it was really, after what Yorath had built up, it just felt like everything was falling apart, and it shouldn't have been. We had some very, very good players. But as you said, the likes of Giggs all of a sudden stopped turning up, which made it even more difficult for the team. Rush was getting older. Southall was getting older, not in their prime anymore. So it was, to be fair to Paul, it was difficult. The team was clearly going through a transitional period. We had to bring through the youth, and there wasn't a lot about at the top level, apart from Giggs and Speed. And the previous world-class players who'd done so well for Yorith were getting on a bit. So in Bobby's defence, it was a very difficult time for him. But it was dark times to be a Wales fan then. Very, very dark.
I always, my dad used to go religiously to the Wales games until he sort of just didn't bother in the end. But you get a lot of Wales fans still bitter about certain individuals, not just Bobby Gould, but like you said about Ryan Giggs, who just started giving up playing in the end, and then now he's on the managerial position now for Wales, and it's the most ironic thing ever because, if you look at his record. I mean, how many caps did he earn? He got to earn over 70 caps or something like that. And that's amazing, for Ryan Giggs. But there is a lot of people who do criticize his commitment to, your country, despite, if you look back on his personal history, growing up, he left Wales when he was 6 or 7, went to Manchester, picked up a Manchester accent, and got into the Manchester vibe and environment. And then all of a sudden, the dedication to Wales, then it was good at the start. And then halfway there, when, the bigger his name got, the bigger player he got, that's when it will come down. It's like Bobby Gould, Ryan Giggs, these kind of individuals who've always been given, the criticism. But did you feel for yourself as a fan that you got to give him the benefit of the doubt, like you said earlier with Bobby Gould?
I think it was difficult for Giggs, as you said, considering he came through so young. I think he broke in the United team when he was 16. He might have got his first cap when he was 17, 18. And he played, until he was almost 40, I think. And you said, he only got 70 caps in that period. It's very good, but, really you'd expect more. But then in his defence, he did have a lot of injuries. Not just crying wolf. He did have a lot of hamstring injuries, certainly in the mid-90s. And I think what made it difficult for someone in Giggs' position was during that period under Bobby Gould and a few managers after that, when Wales were struggling to find their identity, were going through trying to bring through more youth players, so they were obviously going to be on the end of a few hammerings. He was playing for the most successful team in Britain at the time, and then Europe in 1999 when they won the Champions League, Man United. So he had such a strong manager in Alex Ferguson there as well. I can just imagine the pressure he was under from Alex Ferguson. Like, why are you wasting your time playing for Wales? They're not doing anything, not going to qualify for any tournaments when you can keep yourself fit for Manchester United. For a club point of view, from Alex Ferguson's point of view, of course you can understand that. As a Welsh fan at the time, it was extremely frustrating that you needed someone like Ryan Giggs to stand up and be counted and to turn up, even when he was injured, just to have that vibe amongst the squad. And if Giggs was going to turn up, then other players would turn up, and the bit of magic maybe would rub off on them. And it just happened so frequently. It was just so dispiriting. In contrast to Gareth Bale, who just turns up no matter what condition he's in. He's always around the squad, even if he's injured. You feel like he would die for the badge. With Giggs, you just never got that. And I think you look back on his international career, there weren't that many big moments. There weren't that many big games where you said, yeah, Giggs was the best player on the pitch. He got us out of trouble there. It's an iconic performance. He never really had that either. So it was very frustrating, very frustrating. But now he's as manager, we've qualified for the Euros. I think almost all might be forgiven now. For me, anyway, for us to qualify for the Euros again, after it didn't look like we had any chance at all, is fantastic. So I'll give him credit there.
Let's get on to going back into Cardiff City time now. Like I said about 1996, it's going from moments where in the 90s you had the likes of Damon Searle, which I'll send him out a tribute from it because I know Shirley personally, and Sending my love to him because his father passed away not long ago. So all the best, Shirley. And you had Nathan Blake. You had Nathan Blake. Then you've got, I mean, Kevin Ratcliffe had his fair share moment. You know, he didn't stay long with Cardiff City, but he made a name. He submitted himself in Cardiff. Then you got Phil Stant. Then you had, I mean, Andy Legg was coming around the corners, you know, and Robert Earnshaw was coming around in the late 90s as well. I mean, the 90s, proper fashion football, you know, the Oasis coming around the corner as well, because we've had the Cardiff and Manchester City game as well in the FA Cup. Were you there?
I was there. I had a season ticket, and it was just such a fascinating decade. I mean, the 1993 season under Eddie May is still probably my favourite season ever following Cardiff City. And you know, when people have said, you know, the last couple of seasons we've been in the Premier League, oh, it's going to be a disaster if we get relegated, and I said no. At the end of the day, my favourite season was playing in League Two, and it was fantastic. So I'm not worried about what league we play in, because I know how whatever league you're in, if you get a group of committed players playing that brand of football, it can still be exciting. And like you said, that kind of like Wales, that team had such a fantastic mix of youth and experience. You said you had Damon Searle and Jason Perry, like Cardiff, young Cardiff, Gavin Ward, young Cardiff boys coming through, Nathan Blake. And then you had some real experience from the higher level, like Robbie James. Robbie James was fantastic for Cardiff that season we went up. He was just another level to anyone else on the pitch. Kevin Ratcliffe came in the January and just transformed the team as well. And then you had some real players who at League Two, League One level were the best you could get. I mean, Carl Dale and Phil Stant up front. I mean, Phil Stant is probably still my favourite Cardiff City player. He just came into that team around the same time as Radcliffe. And you just felt he would have died on the pitch for Cardiff. He just gave absolutely everything. So that team was, you know, Eddie May was a fantastic personality as well. It was just a great time to be a Cardiff City fan. You know, I was only young at the time, so for that to be one of my first big Cardiff City memories, it was a fantastic time to follow the team. But like with Wales, you know, the wheels came off so quickly. Rick Wright, the chairman at the time, wanted to sell up and go. He made that very clear. This was just a business proposition to him. It was no great love for Cardiff City. And then, you know, we got promoted, but then Nathan Blake moved on after that wonder goal against Manchester City. Gavin Ward went, Paul Ramsey went, Radcliffe, Phil Stant. Everyone just went in such quick succession that, you know, the team collapsed. It lost a lot of momentum, and there was a few. You know, throughout the mid-90s, as with Wales, it was a depressing time to be a Wales and Cardiff City fan. You know, we still went. There's still, you know, only crowds of 4,000 or 5,000 at times, but even then, you know, in the mid-90s, you still had some exciting players coming through. I remember Jason Fowler was a particular favourite of mine. We signed Danny Hill. I think from Spurs, Danny Hill came, and he was a class act at that level as well. So you still kept going, but you could never imagine where the club was going to go at that time. In the mid-90s, it was pretty dark, and there was all sorts of financial problems with the new chairman, Kumar, as well. So the fact that we are where we are now is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, the last 20 years have just been unbelievable roller coaster, which I don't think any club in the United Kingdom can match really for the last 20 years. The highs and lows of Cardiff City are just phenomenal.
When I started supporting Cardiff City, and I stopped supporting them after their first Premier League experience, because it wasn't the season. I'll put it that way. I've said it many times. I've always tried to assure Cardiff City fans that it wasn't the Premier League season that done me in, that Cardiff kept losing all the time. It was the politics. It was, funny enough, the divide between fans, and it really just killed my spirit for Cardiff. And that's where, even prior to that, when I discovered, even though Barry Town have always been there, but in the shadows, because they had that fall in darkness moment in the early 2000s. But, you know, through that period, it was just, because it was really frustrating, and it was really soul destroying, to say the least. But I always have the fond memories of Ninian Park, and I've always had the fond memories of I mean, I will never ever forget. It's just, I remember when we moved to the Cardiff City Stadium and it was that penalty shootout against Leicester City.
Oh,
And
yeah.
do you know what? I will never ever forget this. I'm looking at Marshall and thinking, just save it, just save it. Jan Kermagon just comes in and tries to chip it.
Little dink, yeah.
And I will never forget, just Marshall just takes a dive and he just went, oh. And he just lifts his arm up in the air. It's like, oh, you couldn't get it. Just sticks into my mind, those kind of things. But especially the final South Wales derby at Ninian Park, where it was 2-2 and Mike Dean, as much as a character he was hated by Cardiff City fans, you know, because of the FA Cup final against Portsmouth. He was refereeing that game. And even during the South Wales derby, a lot of Cardiff City supporters had a bit of a sour, we left feelings, had a sour taste whenever Mike Dean came about. But for you, Indy, because I'd always say, for me, growing up, having to witness Cardiff do so much success in the early 2000s, let's say from 2000 to 2008, even though the problems behind closed doors was come into effect, but that must have been some of the best times ever to support Cardiff City.
It was unbelievable what happened to the club. I don't think people realise. I mean, Sam Hammam's had a lot of criticism over the years, but without Sam Hammam coming into that club at that time, we would not be where we are now, and it'd be debatable whether there'd even be a football club to support, because when he came in, he electrified the place. He was talking about Cardiff being as big as Barcelona, and it wasn't like we've heard all that. Other chairmen have come in and given the talk before, but all of a sudden we were spending close to £1 million on Danny Gabardon, and money was flying left, right and centre. And with Robert Earnshaw coming through, a young local lad as well, who was banging in goals. And it was just a phenomenal time. We'd been scrambling around in a bottom division for almost a decade. We'd had no money to spend. And all of a sudden we were like the big time Charlies. And the fans just took to Sam, took that whole atmosphere like a duck to water. It was Sam Hammam and Cardiff City were just made for each other at that time. And it was just such a ride, you know, getting promoted and signing Kavanagh and Peter Thorne, who again, two of my favourite Cardiff City players. Andy Legg he'd always at the club with Jason Bowen before Sam came in, but he seemed to take it up another level. It seemed to bring out the best of Leggy's game out as well, playing with better players. And yeah, it ended, didn't end too well for Sam in the end. We just came close to financial oblivion, and players had to be sold, and protests and all sorts. But I always give massive credit to Sam Hammam. It was so exciting, and he got us to where we are now, to be fair to him.
Do you think it's a bit, I know a lot of Cardiff City fans are still going to have, I keep saying, a sour taste in their mouths because of Sam Hammam, what he did in the last a year or two of his position as a chairman or owner of the club. But do you think now, just looking back, do you think a few people should cut him some slack, or do you think they should tolerate him as much now? Where do you stand as well with?
I think a lot of it's water under the bridge now. At the time, I think everyone was angry. It was very stressful because we thought, God, we could go under here. And I remember, poor Graham Kavanagh had to be sold to keep the club afloat, and he was crying in the car park being sent to Wigan. He didn't want to go, and it was worrying times. The taxman was chasing us, and but for me, like I said, it needed a personality like Sam to come into the club and lift the place. Was it 2000 when he came in? We'd just been relegated. You just sensed us bobbing around the bottom two divisions until the end of time. There was no impetus, no motivation behind the club. So for me, I always give massive credit to Sam Hammam. I think now we forgive and forget and thank him for getting the club to where it is now.
Going on to, I think, just talk about this very briefly before we go on to your novels and, as an author. Let's look at with Cardiff City now and, with the signing of Kiefer Moore, which I think right now is a very big signing for him. I'm very surprised that they got Kiefer. Well, I am, but I'm not at the same time with Kiefer Moore. But it's like when Cardiff City reached the playoffs and throughout that season, a lot of Cardiff City fans saying, we're going to go back up, we're going to go back up. But to me personally, I felt, even though I don't support Cardiff anymore, but for the Cardiff in me was saying it's not going to happen. The squad's been mixed too much, and if Cardiff were to have been promoted instead of Fulham in that playoffs, or say they did well in the playoffs and got promoted, Cardiff wouldn't have lasted again long in the Premier League. But that's just my perspective on it, because I think the players that you had, they were great, but they were not going to be strong enough or capable enough to withstand the likes of Man City, Liverpool now, who've just won the Premier League, Man City, Tottenham, all these clubs, and especially with the likes of Everton now, who are getting the big investments coming in, they weren't going to stand, toe-to-toe with them. And to be perfectly honest with you, if you look on Vincent Tan's net worth as well, and I'm not trying to say his net worth is going to be one of the causes, but if you look at it, he came in as a multi-billionaire for Cardiff. Now he's not saying is a big fault, but he's gone from 1.2 billion to 870 million on his net worth. And you could argue that it could be his business ventures in Malaysia, or you could argue with Cardiff City, or you could argue that he keeps spending too much money on football clubs across Europe and America. But for you, what's your perspective? What's your opinion on the season that's just gone, and what do you hope for with Cardiff City with the following season?
It's been another typical roller coaster season for Cardiff City. We hardly ever have those seasons where there's no drama and we're just mid-table and we're just plodding along. It's always one extreme to the other. And I think, it was such a brutal 12 months for Cardiff, going from, Emiliano Sala's death, which was an absolute tragedy, to relegation, to Warnock going, former player Chris Barker dying, and then Peter Whittingham dying. It was a really dark period for Cardiff, and kicking into the new season, you could just tell from the first game away at Wigan that there was a bit of gloom, bit of a hangover, maybe from being relegated, maybe from the Sala incident still affecting Warnock. I think it just didn't feel right, and a few players, I think, were off their game. I think Flint and Morrison together were just a disaster. It just did not look right at all. The team just looked unbalanced. We didn't seem to have an outlet up front. We'd relied on Patterson to fill a hole in the Premier League, and he wasn't really all guns blazing. Glatzel wasn't all guns blazing. So it was all a bit over the place. And it broke my heart when Warnock went. Going back to your reason for not supporting Cardiff City, that the rebrand was a horrendous period to be a Cardiff City fan. And as you said, I don't think any of the football fans around the country will ever experience what Cardiff City fans did for those 2 or 3 years. It wasn't about watching a football. In the stands, it was vicious. It was horrible to be a Cardiff City fan. You'd be sat next to someone in a red shirt and someone in a blue shirt. And I hated the rebrand. I hated everything it stood for. And it really, really tested your allegiance as a Cardiff fan. It was not a pleasant time. So, when Warnock came into the club, I think we were bottom of the league. The rebrand had torn the guts out of the club. We had no money to spend either. What he achieved was a miracle, an absolute miracle, to get us to steady the ship, to get us promoted, and to unite the fan base. That for me is the biggest achievement of all. For him to unite the fan base, which was totally divided, was just incredible. But it broke my heart when Warnock had to go. I think he knew it was the right time. For whatever reason, the message wasn't going through. Maybe he needed a rest, but it was the right time. And there were not too many people, myself included, who backed Neil Harris. I just thought that sounded like a cost-cutting appointment, another Russell Slade appointment. We spent big money on Warnock. Now we have to get someone in who's not going to cost a lot. But we should have given Neil Harris a lot more credit, because he did very well at Millwall with little money. And then what he achieved at Cardiff straight away, the Morrison and Flint partnership. He realised that wasn't going to work. They were too slow to play together. So he brought Nelson in, who'd hardly had a sniff. And they all of a sudden looked like a partnership. Morrison started getting back to what a fantastic centre-back we know he is. Probably the best probably top 3 centre-backs in the Championship. He brought Will Vokes back in from the cold, who proved a very, very good signing in the end in the middle of the park. He brought Tomlin in from the cold, and Tomlin was just unbelievable once Harris brought him in. He changed Etheridge for Smithies. Smithies ended up being player of the season. So Neil Harris deserves a hell of a lot of credit for what he did at the football club. And he also, he was regarded as being a Warnock junior, just going to be playing similar long ball football to Warnock. But tactically, he showed himself to be pretty astute. He was changing formations. We weren't just lumping the ball forward and bypassing midfield. We were playing through the midfield a lot more, getting people like Tomlin on the ball and using our wingers. And yeah, do you know what? If we'd gone up, I wouldn't have held up much hope for us staying in the Premier League next season. But for me, it's a shame because I think with fans locked out of stadiums at the moment, football clubs certainly below the Premier League going to take a real financial hit. At least in the Premier League, you're still going to get a big chunk of TV money. So for me, I thought, get in the Premier League for a year, get that TV money, stabilise the finances, that'd be fine. And I always see the Premier League as a holiday anyway. It's just like a nice year. You see some world-class players come down, you enjoy some of the games, but ultimately, it's pretty soul-destroying being outside the top six in the Premier League. You're just kind of hoping that you can finish mid-table. If you finish mid-table, it's like winning the league. And you're going to get battered at most games. You're going to be defending for your lives most games. It's fine for a season. I think any longer, it just gets soul-destroying. So for me, I think the Championship is one of the best leagues in the world. I think it's so competitive. Anyone can go up. Anyone can beat anyone. You don't need to spend an absolute fortune to get promoted. And it's always exciting. So for me, I'm happy in the Championship anyway. So I'm looking forward to next season. I think, as you said, Kiefer Moore was exactly the signing we needed. We needed a target man to come in and hold the ball up and be a bit more physical for people like Tomlin and our wingers to play off. So, and he's Welsh as well, so it just ticks so many boxes. And we got him for what I think is a decent price for a 28-year-old international who's proven in the Championship. So I'm looking forward to it. I think maybe only one or two more signings, and yeah, we might be in the playoff mix again.
Let's get on to now the books you have written, and you're a proper football writer, when it comes, and especially the biographies of Duncan Edwards, and you've got David Rocastle and Fred Keenor. I want to mention Fred Keenor a bit because I know we've spoken about it because I told you about the play, and I got to tell you this, and before we get on to how you did the process with Fred Keenor's book and everything. Now, when I wrote, people don't know me, people know me as this football media person, but I love theatre. I love playwrights. I love being a playwright. I've written plays before. I had 2 or 3 under my belt. There's a football play I've written all about Barry Town. That's never going to be touched now because it was too complicated and there's so many things, there's so many inaccuracies. And with respect for the club, I didn't want to touch it ever again. I only did it just to get a good mark in uni, but which it was basically a fact. I only wanted to get a good mark because I knew my stuff. But when the Fred Keenor thing, when Fred Keenor's name mentioned, I thought he's got such a good story. Wikipedia can't be taken into account. There was a lot of stories about Fred Keenor. How he nearly ended his career shortly because of World War I, and he came back and then he captained Cardiff to win the FA Cup, and it was unheard of for a team outside of England, let alone a team from Cardiff, from Wales of all places, to take the cup and say, right, we're coming back with this, and they've got the Welsh Cup as well. So his story just seemed absolute inspiring. So when I started writing it, it was originally a 45-minute one-man play. The monologues were just ridiculous, and I thought it was too, what's the word I'm looking for? No, it'll come back to me. But it was so much, I was telling the audience, not showing it. That was the problem. I can't remember what the word is.
It's always difficult when you're doing a play, though. Yeah. It's so difficult because you are going to end up telling rather than showing because you're limited somewhat.
Yeah, and what was really, and in the end, when I wrote this play, because in my master's degree with drama, the final module was you either write a dissertation, 10,000 words, and I thought I've done enough writing. I'm more than happy to write a play to put on stage, which was to perform a production. So as I was doing it and getting down to the bits and pieces, Stephen said to me, "Why don't you just have a duo?" And I went, "Well, what do you mean?" He went, "Why don't we have Fred Keenor, you playing Fred Keenor, and I'll play a reporter. We'll set it in London. We'll have it as I'm this reporter being anti-Welsh, this anti-Cardiff. He's doubting the teams. He's doubting this, and that was the entire theme, is doubt. And especially because of Fred Keenor, how doctors. I mean, I've read your book as well about it, and it was like doctors telling him, you can't play no more because you got shot in the knee and it's a career threatening. He's like, no, I got to do it. And it's just self-driven. And that's how it came about. So the original script was thrown away, but we took all the notes. And because I was directing it, I wrote it, I produced it. So I kind of knew what to say. And then Steve, who was playing the reporter, had to have notes to question me. So it turned into this big biographical improvised play, and I had a 2-1 out of it. So I was like, great, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, I was like, yes. But then my friend Jordan found out. He said, you got to put it on again. I'll put a review out. And I was thinking, shit. Oh, no, leave me alone. I don't want to touch it. But with you, when you came about writing the novel, which is, I'll say thank you very much for doing it, because I wouldn't have done the play. What was the reason behind starting this biography, and why did you want to do it?
Oh, God. Probably a midlife crisis, to be honest. There's quite a few reasons. Growing up, my mother was friends with an old Cardiff City supporter, and for whatever reason, when he died, he didn't have much, but he gave my mum a cigarette card from the 20s, which featured all the 1927 FA Cup team. And as a kid, I was just fascinated with this cigarette card, and on the back it was talking about Fred Keenor. So just growing up, I loved reading football books as a kid. I must have read, any time there's a football book out, certainly a Cardiff City book, which are really few and far between, I would devour them. And so I became obsessed with this cigarette card, and I wanted to know more about the team, and I wanted to know more about Fred Keenor. And for whatever reason, there was never anything out about him. There wasn't even the internet back then. You couldn't even Wikipedia it or Google Fred Keenor. So anyway, I forgot all about that, and I ended up training to become a lawyer, qualified as a lawyer, worked a few years as a lawyer. And then in 2009, when the financial crash hit, I was working as a lawyer in Cardiff, and I wasn't really enjoying being a lawyer. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and I probably wasn't cut out to be a lawyer anyway, looking back now. And I just thought, I don't really want to be doing this. I'm not sure what I want to be doing. So I thought, right, I'm going to quit law, and I'm going to go coach football in California for 6 months, what I've always wanted to do. And they use the phrase, find yourself. But I just wanted to have a good think while having a good time about what I wanted to do next. And so coached football in California, came back, and I just thought, it was just before, this was in the October 2009. And I thought, well, I've got to get a job. But no one, it was coming up to Christmas, no one was really hiring at the time, and I didn't even know what I wanted to do. And I thought, you've always wanted to write, you like writing, you love football. No one has written this bloody book about Fred Keenor. How is it 2009 and no one has written this book? And it was almost like I almost just wanted to do the research to find out more about him, because I knew so little. So I thought, right, you've got until Christmas to write a book on Fred Keenor, finish it, and that's that. It wasn't even about getting published, really. It was just doing it. And so looking back now, it was absolutely mad. It was madness to try and write a book, research from scratch when there's so little information available, in effectively 6-7 weeks from scratch, from research to finishing it. But yeah, I did it. I think I read it now, and there's a lot of things I would change, and I've learned a lot since doing that. Certainly not to write a book in 6 to 7 weeks. It's just insane. But it was just a fantastic process to do that, to to suddenly have the club archives opened up to me. Richard Shepherd, the club historian, was very helpful. Going through all the newspaper archives in Cardiff Central Library, I discovered an interview. It sounds a bit like your play that Fred gave in 1937, where he gave a serialized interview over a couple of weeks to the Western Mail about his career. It's almost like a big autobiography in itself. So all of a sudden I had loads of first-hand quotes from Fred to use. So yeah, I was just really happy that not only that to learn more about Fred Keenor, but to write the book about him as well. I was really proud of that, and I was going to just leave it at that. All I wanted to do since I was a kid was read a book about Fred Keenor. So writing the book was just meant to be that. It wasn't meant to be anything else. So I was happy just to have achieved that. But obviously it's gone on and on since then.
There was a section of the book that I really found awe-inspiring, and that was when Keenor, it's such tragic after it's like, because he lost his wife in a, well, I mean, you know, so he lost his wife in a, well, he nearly lost his own life in a horrific gas leak in his house, and lost his wife, and he had to go into a home because he was really not well. But what was so emotionally and in a football way so awe-inspiring was that though he was in a home and he was going to be, I always thought, oh, people are going to forget him, no one's going to know. But Cardiff City fans, every Saturday, doesn't matter who it was, they say, Fred, do you want to go to the game? We'll take you. And it was just not just one fan, it was a lot of Cardiff City fans who would do anything for this man. Just to...
Bro, I forgot to mention, actually, it's in the book. Yeah, it was my dad. Was one of the first people to take him to the games.
How did that happen then?
This is, again, I should have mentioned at the start, this is one of the reasons I had such a fascination with Fred Keenor growing up. It wasn't just a cigarette card. It's the fact that my dad, there was so little information about him, but my dad had met him and had taken to a Cardiff City game in the 60s. And he was in a care home in Gabalfa, and he said, almost forgotten. Certainly, footballers certainly didn't make a lot of money when Fred was playing, and his money had been well exhausted by his old age. So yeah, he was pretty destitute. His wife had died tragically. He was quite a sad figure. And I can't remember how my dad came to meet him in his care home in Gabalfa, but I think one of the carers said to him, "Oh, that's Fred Keenor." And my dad, as a big Cardiff City fan, was like, "Wow!" And I think one of the carers said to him, "Oh, he'd love to go to a game. He can't make it by himself anymore." My dad would go every week, so I think my dad just said, "Well, I'll take him." And my dad always remembers coming in. He told the club, I think it was quite lucky for my dad. I think they got invited in the director's box when he was normally standing in the Bob Banks, so it was happy days for my dad. But as they walked into the director's box, my dad was only probably 19, 20 at the time. All the director's box, the chairman, everyone just stood up to applaud as Fred walked in. So, it was a lovely moment that my dad got to play a part of and witness. So, yes. And I think, as you said, he went regularly from then on. So at least he knew before he passed away that his achievements weren't forgotten. Yeah. And, he knew that his status at Cardiff was going to go on forever.
And a statue's outside the Cardiff City Stadium now. So it just absolutely goes to show.
Fair play. That football statues, by and large, have been horrendous. There's been some absolute clangers over the years. But the guys behind the statue who campaigned, funded it, had it designed, they did such an unbelievable job. It's such a great statue, which really epitomizes Fred. I've never heard anyone say a bad word against it, like, "Oh, they should have done this, they should have done that." They just nailed it. And actually, during the time I was writing a book, as I was writing it, suddenly there was a campaign for the statue, to fund the statue. So it kind of felt like this is the moment when I meant to write this book. There's going to be a lot of interest in a statue as well, and it's just all going to come together. People are going to see this campaign for the statue. They're going to want to know more about Fred, and the book's going to be out, and they can all go hand in hand. And a lot of young Cardiff City fans coming through now can know who Fred Keenor was, which is fantastic.
And he's a proper football man, like I read in your book, and it said that even though after his retirement and when your dad took him to the games, even if he was in the director's box or in the stands, he'd be standing up going, "Come on, get it!" Proper football mad and everything. I mean, But the kind of player like Fred Keenor is what a lot of people were destined to be like. It's just one of those things where I think that's why a lot of people who are proper football fanatics are so disappointed in today's modern football, that you get some footballers, I think sometimes some from the 90s going all the way back to the 1920s or 10s or something like that. That's where you get those proper footballers who would die for the badge, who would play for your club. It doesn't matter if you get shot in the knee, or it doesn't matter if your career's nearly over. They would literally play and die for the club.
Well, yeah, Fred almost did. I mean, you're playing for Wales and Canada in a friendly. He put in one of his tackles, which he was renowned for, and a fan ran on the pitch with a gun. Another time for Cardiff City, he put in one of those tackles. A fan ran on the pitch and tried to assault him. He just gave everything. I think for Cardiff City, we know the story. It's almost too good to be true. The boy from Cardiff who gets injured in the Second World War, almost loses his leg, is told he's never going to play football again, makes a comeback and rises to become captain of his hometown club to win the FA Cup. I mean, that's the story we know about Fred. It's like a movie. But then the game that a lot of football historians think that really epitomises Fred Keenor came when he was 36. At the end of his career, Cardiff were well gone from the First Division. Fred was on a downward spiral, and he was called up to play for Wales, which he was captain. And it was against Scotland, in Scotland, when Scotland had a very good team. But that day, the Wales team was full of amateurs. All the professional players were played for their clubs, and the Welsh team at the time, you couldn't say no, you come and play for Wales. So Fred was the only professional there, and he was the captain. And Scotland was full of their professional team, their first team. And so this game became known as Keenor and the Unknowns, because apparently he basically took the team for a training session before the game. He had a 4-hour team talk to talk them all through their positions, what they were going to do. And then apparently he was like a man possessed during this game against Scotland. And the referee, there's a quote from the referee at the end of the game, said, Keenor just would not stop swearing that I was going to send him off. When I looked in his eyes, I realised he'd gone. Like, he wasn't registering what I was saying. He wasn't listening. He was so focused on the game that there was no way of getting through to him. And I just thought, I'll just let him get on with it. I'm not going to send him off. I don't know what's going to happen here. And Wales drew 1-1, like this amateur Welsh team with a full Scotland team. And so a lot of people say that was the game that epitomised Fred Keenor more than any other, which showed this will to win, this fighting spirit, which is probably almost unequalled in Cardiff and Welsh football history.
Do you think they'll, I mean, me being a writer myself, I mean, I'll probably go back and adjust a few things because it's not really gone out properly. But do you think there'll ever be, even if it's just like you get a lot of BBC Wales dramas that are specifically for BBC Wales, where they just cover, I don't know, let's just say like a Richard Burton autobiography or documentary or something like that. Do you think there'll ever be like one of those for Fred Keenor? If not, BBC, if you're watching, I'm your guy.
Yeah, well, God, when the book came out, I got called by a production company in Cardiff Bay who make football documentaries, making them for the BBC, and it was talked about. And it was even talked about, I'm not sure how far down the road they got with this, but they were going to get Stefan Rodri, known Cardiff City fan who's renowned, known as being Dave Coaches from Gavin and Stacey, to narrate it, which I thought was fantastic. That'd be brilliant. And it looked like it was going to happen, certainly to coincide with the statue as well. It seemed like that would be a great time to do a documentary. For whatever reason, it didn't happen. And I just think I see so many things go out on BBC Wales, which in my mind are nowhere near as worthy as a documentary on Fred Keenor would be. Like I said, it's like too good to be true story. This Cardiff boy rising to captain his hometown club to win the cup for Cardiff City. It could be a movie. So I'm pretty certain it'll happen one day. Let's hope. They come knocking on your door and they Reece, will you help us make this? Because it's baffling why it's taken this long anyway. It's a no-brainer.
Let's put it out there, right? It's just for fun. It's only a predicament. Say you were in charge of making this film. like say like United when they had David Tennant come in to play Jimmy Murphy, right? Let's just say it was one of those, right? If you're in charge, just say, right, who is going to play Fred Keenor? Who would you? I don't get me started. I had my dad. I had a lot of football fans asking me who would you play, and I couldn't think for the life of me who would play this individual. You had to be a diehard football fan to know your football for the start, but then you had to know your true football knowledge to actually get who Fred Keenor was. You know, so who would you?
Yeah, as you said, I think it's difficult because I'm fed up of watching football films where the lead actors quite clearly cannot play football. Not even like they don't even look professional. Don't even look like they could get in a Sunday league team half the time. So you've got to get someone who could play a bit of football. To be fair, I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix recently, the Julian Fellows TV series, A Beautiful Game, which is set in the 1800s, set on the founding of football and Blackburn Rovers. The actors there did a good job, and that was quite enjoyable. But Fred Keenor, I think you're going to struggle to find an actor who looks like Fred because he's very unique looking. He's only 5'6", which for a centre back is just
Unheard of.
Unbelievable. This goes to show the stature of the man to play at that level and that position and that size. But there's no Welsh actors that really come to mind, to be honest. I keep thinking of oh god, the Scottish actor.
Ewan McGregor?
No, he's in Atonement, it's Split.
Oh, James McAvoy.
James McAvoy. Maybe like a James McAvoy, but I don't know if he can play football, but he's got that intensity.
Yeah, I know James McAvoy does. He apparently he's a football fanatic, and apparently he was like many actors. It's like Matt Smith from Doctor Who. I see him roughly to play Fred Keenor, and Matt Smith. He was destined to be a footballer. He had trials with Nottingham Forest. He was nearly that close, and as a few things that come to mind, injuries come in the way, or something else comes into mind, and then next Matt Smith goes from footballer to playing the doctor. Yeah. So, but it is hard to find a Welsh actor, and it's like one person said Michael Sheen. I said, with all due respect to Michael Sheen, he's a Brian Clough. He's Brian Clough. I mean, as
if you talk 20 years ago, Michael Sheen might not have been a bad shout because he's certainly around that size, and we all know Michael Sheen can play football. He's a very good footballer who I think was on the path to being professional himself, and he's just a phenomenal actor. But probably that time is gone for Michael Sheen for Fred Keenor, I think.
Yeah, I always had easy, predictions of who could play who, and a lot of things I've said to a lot of people. I went, if I was in charge, I said I'd have Ernie Curtis and Len Davis. They would be played by familiar Welsh actors. I said, oh, just even get those who are well known but not well known. Just, and I said this person could be played by a good Welsh actor. This person, and every time someone said, "What about Fred Keenor?" That, and I thought, bugger if I know. We'll have to.
It's a really difficult one. Really difficult. Yeah, it's almost like it'd almost have to be someone unknown. You'd have to unearth a gem. I can't think of anyone who would really fit that role.
So it's great to talk about Fred Keenor in some ways, but let's quickly talk about your other two books. I know you've written Alligator Blood as well, but I want to talk about the two other autobiographies, which is Duncan Edwards and David Rocastle. Why those two players, if I may ask?
There are a lot of reasons. I think with Duncan Edwards, again, I said at the top of the conversation, I go watch a lot of games with my father and my godfather, my brother and my cousin. And we'd always over the years, we've seen all the greats of recent years, from Gaza to Thierry Henry, Lionel Messi, Ronaldo. And you always start talking about, who's the best player you've ever seen, or who do you think is the best player of all time? And my godfather would always say Duncan Edwards, because he saw Duncan Edwards play in the 50s. He used to get a bus from Aberystwyth to Manchester just to watch Duncan Edwards play. And we'd all be like, oh, shut up, come on, you're just saying that because he died young in Munich, and there's no way Duncan Edwards, don't be stupid. And he'd always say, no, I've seen all the greats, Duncan Edwards was the best. And so again, just like with Fred, I started thinking, well, was Duncan Edwards the best? It'd be interesting to learn more. And amazing, there wasn't a book about Duncan Edwards, like a proper book. There were lots of little books about Duncan over the years, or Duncan was included in books about the Busby Babes, but not a proper book. So I thought, wow, this is again a question I really want to look into. The book's not been written, so I'm going to do it. I'll do it more for my own sake, just to see what people were saying about Duncan Edwards when he was playing. I wanted to read all the newspaper reports then, rather than after he's died, when people might be a bit see it with rose tinted glasses. And so that was the reason I wrote Duncan Edwards, which was a tremendously sad book to write. Very, very difficult. We all know about the Busby Babes, but when you actually write about them, and you write about Duncan, and you come to really know who they were as men, as people, and what they had to live for, and their tremendous potential, to see that all ripped away in Munich, just unbelievable. Even now, it chokes me up thinking about it. It was just so brutal. And then obviously I wanted to write a happier book afterwards, so I chose David Rocastle, which was just as tragic. And again, that came from a place of curiosity and the commercial aspect with Rocky, that growing up, as I said, there wasn't a lot of football on TV as a kid. The best it got for me growing up was watching Saint and Greavesy on a Saturday lunchtime, which would have all the highlights on. And I just remember as a 7-year-old, they showed a clip of Arsenal playing Middlesbrough. And David Rocastle picks up the ball and just does this step over, which I've never seen anyone do better than David Rocastle. His step over would just destroy players. And he scored this fantastic goal then. I just remember going in the back garden as a 7-year-old thinking, how the hell did he do that step over? It wasn't like you could go on YouTube now and watch it again and again. So I'd always kept my eye out for David Rocastle. And late 80s, early 90s, he was a superstar. He was regarded as one of the top players in England. He was going to go on and on and on. Won the double, or won the league in '89 famously with Arsenal. And then he got a club record transfer to Leeds United, who just won the league. So you just thought, this guy is made. He's going to be a legend, still in his mid-20s. And I just remember throughout the 90s then, his career totally collapsed, like nothing I've ever seen before in my life. Gone from superstar to in his late 20s on loan at Hull City in the 3rd Division, who were rock bottom of the 3rd Division. And then when he died, I was playing football at university, and I came off the pitch and said, did he hear David Rocastle had died? And I was just like, what? Like, how has someone who 10 years ago had the world at their feet, how has their life collapsed to having no career and now being dead? It just did not match up. So once again, I wanted to get to the root of what happened to Rocastle. Why did his career go the way it was? And amazingly, for reasons I was later to find out why, no book had been written about it, which seemed insane considering he's such an Arsenal legend. So again, I thought, well, I want to find out the answer to this question. A book hasn't been written about him. I'll do it then.
Did you have to get any permission from any family? Because I know sometimes books have been written. It's like I remember watching the Brian Clough documentary, and there was a section where they talked about the Damned United book, with and they said and Barbara Clough said this particular sentence that, oh, it's just another book, right? Meaning, oh, so the Clough family just don't mind the books being written, but then it's just it is a question of when's the right time to ask a family member, or when is it suitable? How did you?
It's always difficult. Every book's difficult, and you soon work out that every family has disruptions and divides. Certainly every book I've seen to work on has, and Rocastle was probably the most difficult of all, because I initially got in touch with Rocky's sister and said, I'm thinking about doing this book about David. Would you be happy with that? And she was like, yeah, we've been waiting for this. We want to tell David's story. Perfect. So she then got David's brother, daughter, all the aunties and uncles, all the blood Rocastle family from him growing up together. So I thought, great, with the Rocastle family on board, away we go, and I'm not going to have a problem here. Sadly, as I started writing, it became clear that there was an issue between the Rocastle family and David Rocastle's wife and children. And that became very difficult. I've got to be careful what I say, because there were quite a few issues I can't go into publicly.
No, it's I was just going to say
they were friendly with a lot of the players David played with, certainly in the '89 team. David's wife was still friendly with the likes of Ian Wright and people like that. So it became very difficult and very strained, and it was not my intention to upset anyone at all. I just wanted to tell David Rocastle's story. And it got to the point where David's sisters, brothers, daughter, aunties, uncles loved the book, were thrilled with the book, said, this is the David Rocastle we know. David would have loved this. And then on the flip side of the coin, I don't think David's wife and other children were too enamoured. And some of Rocky's teammates chose to get involved as well when it wasn't. I don't think it was their place to get involved when it was a family issue. So it all left a very, very bitter taste in my mouth. That, sadly, and when I personally think it was a book that was a nice tribute to a player I admired and a man who I admired. But there we go. It's just, you get it with every book.
Yeah,
you get the highs and lows.
Is there any other books you're planning on doing without giving away too much detail? Because I know a lot of authors do go, oh, there is one, but is there any specific player, club, history that you intend to write?
It's difficult now, because after Rocky, that hurt Rocky, the way all that went. That was not pleasant. And it's just got to the point now with football books, they're very, very difficult to write, because most of the books have been written. Certainly, to write a book commercially that's going to do well, it's difficult anyway. So you've got to be looking at big names. They've all been done to death. And then if you're going to write an autobiography about a current player, now there's so many agents involved and PR people that it just gets sanitized to death. It's just not even worth reading. I can't remember the last time I read a football book because of that. So I've got one or two ideas of something a little different. I'm not sure if they're commercial ideas, but in terms of biographies, autobiographies, I think the genre it needs a reboot. It needs something like a Damned United that came along and it just was like, wow, what the hell is this? It's totally different to what we've read before. It always feels like a moment's come again. The football books just aren't exciting anymore. They're pretty bland at the moment. So yeah, for the last couple of years, I've done a lot of ghostwriting. I've got a book out in September called Chemical Warrior, which is going to be serialised in the Daily Mail next week. I've done a lot of screenwriting, which is what I always wanted to do anyway. That was always my dream, to do screenwriting. So I've got a lot of different projects in development in America. So just waiting to, just still plugging away, really. Just football at the moment. I loved writing football books. Certainly the Cardiff City books were a real pleasure for me as a Cardiff City fan, but there's nothing on the horizon at the moment, really.
Well, James, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Dragon's Voice podcast. It means a lot for you to come on and talk about you as a fan, as an author as well, and just have a fun chat, really. Just talk about football.
Yeah, I've loved it. It's been great just talking about football. Brilliant. Certainly like Cardiff City and Wales, which normally I get asked to do podcasts. It's about Manchester United and Duncan Edwards, which I always love. But the chance to talk about Cardiff City is, it's not fantastic.
Well, the thing is with me as well is like I'll tell you very quickly, and I know a lot of people who follow my podcast know already, but it's the reason why I created this podcast is because Welsh football, in hindsight, unless you're Cardiff City, but let's just say the 5 clubs of Welsh clubs being in the English league system, they're always talked about. Whereas it sounds a bit hypocritical to me, because the only interviews I've had were with former Cardiff City players and etc. But those who have gone on to the Welsh Premier League, Welsh football as a whole, doesn't get talked about or respected as much. And when I had Andy Legg on the show, it was very brilliant. What he said is, it's just people undervalue or overlook the league. They think it's either a stepping stone where players who are bang average, who can actually, some of them make it to the League Two or anything, but people seem to forget that you can get talent from these places. And one of the key examples is, at the moment, Christian Deutsch, who's, you know, making a big name for himself in Hibernian. The football club, Hibs, the Wales fans, they're all literally telling the FAW, telling Ryan Giggs, get on the phone and call him up. He's got what it takes, you know. So it's, but he's come from Croeso Keylog, Barry Town, Carmarthen. He's come from these Welsh clubs where, you know, people were, well, unless you were in the late 90s, early 2000s with Barry, but now people just don't look at Barry like that no more. They don't look at these clubs as dominant or...
I think with Barry Town, I think firstly, South Wales is a real hotbed of football talent, which is really underdeveloped. There's some tremendous young footballers over the years I've seen in Cardiff, and just for whatever reason, just haven't made it. I haven't had the opportunities to make it. But yeah, you know, I think now with Barry Town, the signing of someone like David Cottrell is really raising a profile and raising some eyebrows. Yeah. Like, if David should still be playing Championship football. He's still young enough. He's still talented enough. So for them to get David Cottrell on the football pitch for Barry Town playing in Europe is a massive coup. And the people like myself who might not have paid much attention, maybe even I'm guilty of that. All of a sudden, my head's turned, thinking, "Oh, how are Barry Town doing? How's David Cottrell doing?" So I think that's the signing of that caliber is really going to boost the profile of the league and get a lot more eyeballs on it now, because there is talent there. And over the years, people like Leon Jeanne have been playing the Welsh Premier League and Welsh football over the years. Leon Jeanne should have been playing Premier League football. The fact he was playing in the Welsh Premier League. What an opportunity to go see a talent like that play. There are some very, very talented footballers still playing in the Welsh Premier League.
I always want Leon Jeanne to come on the show, just to hear his stories and what he has to say.
I know Leon very, very well. We worked together a lot in the past. We were actually going to do a book together. We started filming a documentary. I got him a trial at Brighton 6-7 years ago under Gus Poyet. I went to Brighton with him for 3 weeks, stayed with him in a hotel room while he was doing pre-season with Brighton. And it was phenomenal to watch Leon. He'd had, to be in that environment, Championship football again after so long away. He was the last trialist left standing. And Gus Poyet called us into his office and said, you can clearly play. And he was just as good as anyone in that Brighton team. But he wasn't fit enough at the time, and they just spent £1 million on Lua Loire as a winger. And he said, "Look, you're not fit enough. It's going to take you 3 months to get fit. So you're probably not going to play at the moment. You need to be playing. But I'll call Swindon, who Gus was manager of before, and hopefully get you in at Swindon, because Gus thought he should be playing pro football still." And for whatever reason, it didn't happen. It just didn't happen, and it's a tragedy for Leon. It's a tragedy for Welsh football, because he should have been playing the Premier League. He should have been playing for Wales, and it just didn't pan out the way it was. But Leon has an unbelievable story, which he hasn't been able to tell to date. But one day, hopefully, one of us will get out, and that'll be a story worth telling. That's a football book I want to read.
So, in hindsight, how do you look back now as someone who's written 3 books, all about 3 gifted, incredible players, and as a Cardiff City fan, how do you look back on that?
Well, the Cardiff City books or the Duncan Edwards, David
Rocastle? All of them, just as an author, really. How do you look back on it now?
I'm just so happy that as a young kid, grew up being a Cardiff City fan who loved reading football books, to be able to do this as a living, this is my full-time profession, it's just, I'm so lucky. I wake up every day and I pinch myself that I'm actually getting to write for a living now. And certainly that when I get to write about Cardiff City, after Fred Keenor, I helped ghostwrite books for Christian Roberts and Phil Dwyer. I just couldn't believe it. couldn't believe it that I was getting this opportunity. I had someone like Phil Dwyer, who was Cardiff City's record appearance holder, ringing me up and saying, "Will you write my book for me?" I was like, "What? This is unbelievable." I was so honoured to do it. So nothing gives me more pride than going in the Cardiff City club shop and seeing one of my books on the shelf. No matter what I achieve, if one of my films gets made or whatever, that would be fantastic. That would be a dream. But seeing the Fred Keenor book on the bookshelf in the Cardiff City club store was the moment for me. That's all I ever wanted. So yeah, I'm so thrilled it came to be.
Well, thank you so much for, like I said, I know I said thank you earlier on, but James, thank you so much for coming on the Dragon's Voice podcast to talk about your books, your experience as a fan. I really do appreciate it. And again, in the future, I'd be honoured and happy for you to come back on the show again. It's just been an incredible chat, and we could talk about other things as well. You know, it doesn't have to be about Cardiff or anything.
Yeah, I'd love any opportunity to speak about Cardiff and Wales, and count me in.
Thank you so much, James. Wish you all the best. So, guys, thank you again for tuning in on the Dragon's Voice podcast, and I'm glad you stayed with us all the way through just to listen to us as fans, you know, to talk about football. That's what it is. It's the Welsh football family. We're here to talk about Welsh football. That's the main thing. And if you feel like you can't get on it, of course you can get on it. It's all about football. It's all about Welsh football. Fans are more than welcome to come on the show. I've said this time and time again. Just come on the show. So guys, if you want to come on, just send me a message on the Twitter at DragonsVoice20 or at Deansy_boy, and we'll sort it out. No problem. So guys, again, thank you, James, for coming on the podcast. Kindly appreciated it. And guys, thank you for tuning in to the Dragon's Voice podcast. I've been your host, Truly Reesteens, and I'll see you all very soon. Take care.